All right, we are live and going to admit everybody.
Good luck.
Hi. Welcome to the revised Lead and Copper Rule public listening session. My name is Kiana Blunt, and I will be facilitating today's session. If you haven't already, we invite you to view the EPA Administrator's video message on the importance of these engagements to the agency. It can be found at www.epa.gov/safewater. This session is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. Before we begin, I would like to introduce representatives from EPA who are here to listen to your comments. For this session, we have Jennifer McLean, Jack Bowles, and Eric Bernison. Jennifer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Kiana. Thank you for facilitating for us today. Hello, I'm Jennifer McLean, and I'm the Director of the Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water at the Environmental Protection Agency. Today, we're here to listen to you and to hear about how lead has impacted your community. Your input will help EPA as we review the lead and copper rule revisions and work to ensure that we are doing our best to protect public health, especially for those that are most at risk and impacted by lead in drinking water. Thank you for your time today, and we appreciate your input, and we're looking forward to hearing your comments. Eric?
Thank you, Jennifer. I want to add my welcome to those of you who are participating. My name is Eric Bernison, and I am the Director of Standards and Risk Management in the Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water at the US EPA. We really appreciate your input and taking the time tonight, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Jack?
Thank you, Eric, and thank you to everybody who's taken time to join us tonight, this evening. I'm Jack Bowles, EPA's Director of State and Local Government Relations. In my role, we work with all EPA programs and regions to strengthen partnerships with state and local governments around the country. We help support their programs, solve specific problems they may have, and also work to ensure that their voices are heard in major EPA actions like this rulemaking. We appreciate, again, your time and look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, Jennifer, and Eric. Now I'm going to go over a few ground rules. Each participant is allotted 3 minutes to make their comments. Your adherence to this time allocation will allow all participants an equal opportunity to provide their comments. When it is your scheduled, When it is your scheduled time, I will call your name and invite you to unmute your microphone so you may begin your statement. At that time, please make sure to unmute your microphone on Zoom, as well as the computer or phone you're joining from. If I cannot hear you, I will let you know. If possible, please consider turning on your camera if you are comfortable doing so. When you have 1 minute left, I will turn on my camera and you should begin to wrap up your statement. I may give a verbal warning at 30 seconds and will hold up a red card when your 3 minutes are up. At this time, we will mute your microphone. If you're joining by telephone, I'll give you a verbal warning at 30 seconds and when your 3 minutes are up. Again, to ensure that everyone signed up for the session is able to speak, we ask that you keep within the time limit and keep your comments focused on lead in drinking water and the revised lead and copper rule. And we thank you for your interest and look forward to hearing your input. We will start with our first time slot. Our first speaker is Victoria Kraus from North Carolina. Your microphone is on. Please begin your statement.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments this evening. I'm speaking on behalf of NC Child, a statewide nonprofit agency that advocates on behalf of North Carolina's children. Among the proposed changes to the federal lead and copper rule is a new requirement to test lead in drinking water at schools and childcare centers. This requirement has the potential to protect millions of young children from toxic lead. However, as the EPA revisits this regulation, administrators have an opportunity to further safeguard children's health. NC Child, in partnership with RTI International, identify 4 ways that the EPA can strengthen a requirement to test and remove lead in drinking water in the places where children learn and play. First, the EPA should test all buildings despite age. In 1986, the Safe Drinking Water Act was revised to require that water faucets and pipes be lead-free, but lead-free was defined as materials containing less than 8% lead. As childcare centers built between 1988 and 2014 may still contain significant lead in plumbing and fixtures, testing all buildings despite age will ensure that no building poses a considerable risk of lead exposure. Secondly, we recommend testing every drinking water tap. The results of RTI's Clean Water for Carolina Kids pilot study and program reinforce that lead levels vary from tap to tap within the same building. While more than 8% of centers have had a tap with lead at or above 15 parts per billion, only 2% of samples exceeded this value. 2 drinking water samples may be adequate for residential childcare centers where the kitchen sink is the main drinking water tap. But the statewide Clean Water for Carolina Kids program currently underway in our state is demonstrating that childcare centers use approximately 6 drinking water taps per center. And that is out of a sample of 2,200 licensed childcare centers in our state and a total of 13,000 drinking water samples collected to date. Thirdly, regular testing every 1 to 3 years is the best way to protect kids from lead in drinking water. Lead levels in drinking water can change based on seasonal changes in water source and chemistry, plumbing problems like clogged faucets, and infrastructure and building changes. One-time testing is not effective for catching changing lead levels and can leave children at risk of exposure. Fourthly, funding is needed. The proposed revisions do not mention federal funding to implement a requirement for testing at schools and childcare centers. Funding and support are needed to complete testing without burdening local government budgets and local public water utilities. Funding for educational outreach and materials are also needed to help successfully communicate and take action to get the lead out. And finally, novel, scalable testing strategies are critical. The Clean Water for Carolina Kids program received Harvard's Roy Award for Environmental Partnership in 2020 based on its novel approach to address lead in childcare, water, and schools. This program is scalable as a national model to identify, communicate, and take action to eliminate lead in children's drinking water. This approach to lead testing at childcare centers and schools makes it possible to test and take action on every tap to better protect children's health. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Andrew Barron from Michigan. Andrew, your microphone is on. Please begin your statement.
Oh, I actually to have myself not present in this to like send out an email.
Oh. Thank you, Andrew. Our next speaker is Charmaine Morrison from New York. Charmaine, your microphone is on. Please begin your statement.
Good evening. My name is Charmaine Morrison, and I'm an attorney with Earth Justice. Earth Justice currently represents Newburgh Clean Water Project, Sierra Club, United Parents Against Lead, and the NAACP in a challenge to the lead and copper rule revisions EPA finalized in January. I present comments today solely on behalf of Earth Justice. It's no secret that the federal lead and copper rule failed to prevent the devastating lead in drinking water crises our country has faced in recent years. After decades spent petitioning EPA to strengthen the original 1991 rule, public health and environmental justice advocates were hopeful that the new rule would bolster public health protections for the millions of Americans still served by lead service lines. Many of us were sorely disappointed. The revised rule EPA published in January fails in several critical respects, including its slowdown of mandatory lead service line replacement, its maintenance of a lead action level of 15 micrograms per liter, and its relaxed compliance requirements for small water systems, which make up 92% of all systems. EPA's defense of these counterproductive provisions do not pass legal or moral muster. In addition to revisiting these and other problematic provisions in the rule, EPA must flesh out the extremely thin environmental justice analysis it offered in the rule revisions. In Executive Order 13990, President Biden calls on federal agencies to advance environmental justice where the federal government has historically failed to meet its commitment to public health. Executive Order 12898 similarly requires EPA to identify and address disproportionately high and adverse human health or environmental effects of the rule revisions on minority populations and low-income populations. As EPA is undoubtedly aware, lead service lines disproportionately serve America's older housing stock, which in turn tends to be inhabited by low wealth and communities of color. These groups often cannot afford to replace the portions of lead service lines on their property. EPA fails to grapple with these inequities. Indeed, the agency insists that its rule revisions comply with relevant environmental justice authorities. This insistence is ill-founded. We urge EPA to initiate a new rulemaking that corrects these and other fatal flaws in the January rule and better protects public health. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Our next speaker is Cindy Roper from Michigan. Cindy, your microphone is on. Please begin your statement. Sorry, so it looks like Cindy hasn't been able to join us. At this time, we will take a 15-minute break while we wait for our next set of speakers to join us. I will take this opportunity to remind you all that you can submit a written comment to the docket by going to the web address provided on the screen, www.regulations.gov. We will resume again shortly. Thank you. I'd like to welcome back our listeners, participants, and speakers at this time. We'd like to thank you all for your patience this evening as we move through our listening session today. We've had some folks who decided not to speak today, so we were a little ahead of schedule, which inspired the break. We have our listeners back with us. So at this time, we would like to welcome our next speaker, which is Cindy Roper from Michigan. Cindy, please unmute your microphone and begin your statement.
All right, I think I'm all set. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak during tonight's session. My name is Cindy Roper, and I'm speaking tonight as a resident of East Lansing, Michigan. However, for identification purposes, I'm also a Michigan Senior Policy Advocate for the Natural Resources Defense Council, and I'm a former member of EPA's National Drinking Water Advisory Council. Over the past 25 years, I've served on several EPA federal advisory committees and on the Arsenic and Drinking Water Cost Review Panel. I was a volunteer, still volunteer with Flint Rising, and I was on the ground with the community members in the aftermath of the Flint water crisis. I was also a part of the stakeholder group that helped shape Michigan's lead and copper rule, which attempted to address the many shortcomings of the federal lead and copper rule. And finally, it wasn't until the past 5 years that I realized my personal connection to lead and drinking water exposure as I lived in Providence, Rhode Island from 1988 through 1994. I have a few recommendations to share this evening, and I want to spend a little longer time with one of them. But I'm asking for these for the benefit of future generations, that under the federal lead and copper rule, EPA should set a maximum contaminant level at the tap of 5 parts per billion for lead, require all lead service lines to be replaced in their entirety within 10 years, to ban partial lead service line replacements, to reduce the lead action level from 15 parts per billion to 5 parts per billion, and to improve sampling for both the first draw and for water from the lead service lines. In Michigan, we now require both a first and a fifth liter sample in order to try to characterize both the internal plumbing as well as the water in the service line. We would like to see as well better corrosion control, better monitoring, better public education, and better notification. We improved on some of those pieces in Michigan, but we did not go far enough. So I wanted to talk more about lead in schools. And I know I don't have a lot of time, but we know there is no safe level of lead in drinking water. And NRDC looked at places like the state of New York, which has a mandatory testing requirement, and basically found that around 82% of New York public school buildings reported that one or more tap tested above 15 parts per billion. Again, the safe level of lead in drinking water is 0. More than 56% of New York school buildings tested above 15 parts per billion, and at 5% or more of their water outlets. And there was actually a higher rate of taps testing at that level outside of New York City than inside the city. And then we also looked at the Indiana data. They had a voluntary lead testing program back in from 2017 through 2018. And of the more than 1,700 eligible K through 12 public schools and educational facilities, 60% enrolled in the program, 57,000 samples were collected, and their samples revealed that 62% of schools had at least one fixture with lead over 15 parts per billion, 7% had more than 10 fixtures above 15 parts per billion. So if EPA is going to require action on lead in schools under the Safe Drinking Water, it should be requiring water utilities to support a filtration first strategy with testing after filtration to ensure that the water stations are working. Michigan currently has bipartisan legislation called our Filter First bills that provide a roadmap for a cost-effective way to ensure kids have lead-free water at schools and, in fact, childcare centers. The traditional test, chase, and replace approach is costly, and it is reintroducing lead into schools because lead-free products actually contain lead. And we need, of course, truly lead-free products before we begin ripping the pipes and fixtures out of our schools. We did a cost analysis for the state of Michigan and found that in the first year of Filter First, it was 2/3 the cost of a test, chase, and replace strategy that just addressed 40% of the fixtures, not the pipes, just the fixtures in the school. And that over 10 years, it was 2/3 less the cost of a test, chase, and replace strategy. So again, if EPA is going to get involved in this lead in school drinking water, it should not be through additional testing. As we all know from sampling at homes, lead release is variable. And you can test one tap one day and another day it will give you a different level. We should just go forward and protect kids from lead in school drinking water and to do it in a cost-effective way. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak and for your willingness to take all of these comments.
Thank you for your comments, Cindy. At this time, we will take another 15-minute break while we wait for our next set of speakers to join. Again, I want to thank you all for your patience in listening this evening. We had some people who decided not to speak, so we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, but I'd like to take this opportunity to remind you that you can submit a written comment to the docket by going to the web address provided on the screen, www.regulations.gov. And if you are interested in viewing videos from our previous sessions, those videos can be viewed at the same live stream link. So we will resume again in about 15 minutes. Thank you for your patience. Welcome back to all of our participants today. Thank you for your patience in listening this evening. We've had some people decide not to speak, so we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but it is important to us to stay on the line until all registered speakers have had the opportunity to log on and speak. So I'll take this opportunity to remind you all that you can submit written comment to the docket by going to the web address provided on the screen, www.regulations.gov, and searching the docket number displayed, EPA HQOW 2021-0255. And I'll also mention that if you're interested in viewing videos from our previous sessions, those videos can be viewed at the same live stream link provided on the slide. So we are going to take another break while we wait for our next set of speakers to join and provide them the opportunity to share. Thank you. At this time, I would like to welcome back our participants, listeners, and speakers. Thank you so much for your patience this evening. And we've had some folks decide not to speak, so we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but want to stay on the line so that all registered speakers have the opportunity to log on and speak. So at this time, we will welcome our next speaker, Justin Trong from California. Justin, your microphone is on. Please begin your statement.
Okay. So, what should I talk about, right? Since I got here late at about an hour ago, so I was wondering, what's this experiment of this water crisis that we're going through? Since in our state of California, we're experiencing drought conditions in courtesy of we're not getting enough rain, and that can cause fire damages and high winds due to hot temperatures.
Hi, Justin. So this listening session is on the revised lead and copper rule. And the format that we have set up today is for participants to share a statement and for EPA to listen. So if you would like to provide a statement, feel free to do that at this time.
So what are examples of a statement, for example?
Any feedback that you would like to give our listeners, senior EPA management at this time on the revised lead and copper rule?
Lead and copper. So what's this lead and copper have to do with water?
Yes, so at this time, we're just kind of opening up the session for folks to share any thoughts that they have. So we will not be responding to questions during this session. But if you would like to submit comments on this revised rule, you can do so on our docket at www.regulations.gov. And you can provide a written comment if you'd like to think about that a little further and submit a written comment.
Oh, I get it, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that helps me.
But we want to thank you for your interest and joining us today. And I think at this time, we will proceed with another break as we await our other registered speakers to join the line. So I'd like to just kind of highlight that if you're interested in viewing our previous live stream videos, you can do so at the live stream link provided on the slide. And also, if you have a written comment to make, you can do so at www.regulations.gov. So we will pause again and wait for other registered speakers to join the line. Thank you all very much for your patience this evening. Hello, everyone. At this time, I would like to welcome back our listeners and our participants. Thank you all for your patience this evening as we wait for our speakers to arrive and share their statements. At this time, our next speaker is Jasmine Powell from Missouri. Jasmine, at this time, you can unmute your microphone and begin your statement.
Thank you. So this country is at an environmental and ethical state of emergency. I come to you not only as an environmental justice advocate, but as a concerned citizen and mother. I applaud the Environmental Protection Agency for taking action to ensure all Americans are safe from environmental harm. Everyone remembers when they first learned of the poisoning marketed as a water crisis of Flint, Michigan, a city of primarily Black Americans, at the hands of its local government. We were outraged and alarmed, then eventually complacent. More recently, Newark, New Jersey, another city of primarily Black Americans, had been drinking lead-filled water for decades. Days after this news broke, MTV held the Video Music Awards in Newark without any acknowledgement of this atrocity. It is widely understood that no level of exposure to lead or copper is safe. The effects of exposure, especially on a consistent and long-term basis, are essentially an economic or actual death sentence. From liver and heart disease in adults to lifelong learning disabilities and lower IQs in children, the effects of lead and copper are wide-ranging. To be clear, lead and copper are toxic, poisoning the still developing brains of young children. How many potential brilliant rocket scientists or caring grandmothers are we going to lose? How many marginalized young people will be unfairly locked away because of decisions made not only in youthful ignorance, but due to actual cognitive disabilities because of the water they paid for? In a country that is still dealing with the remnants of indigenous genocide, enslavement, Jim Crow, and biased immigration policies, the neighborhoods, schools, and communities with most lead exposure serve communities of color. Policies that were developed during times of systematic inequality persist today. This administration has the opportunity and responsibility to rectify these injustices. We are a nation of unlimited potential. We sent a man to the moon. We also sent armed forces to countries across the globe in the name of freedom and democracy. If we want to live out the creed that all people deserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then we must start at home. We must take immediate action, from policies and regulations to punishing corporations and public officials that have knowingly engineered this crisis. My 5-year-old, a brilliant, beautiful Black girl, and every child deserve a country where citizens are not paying ever-rising utility bills for poison. The only way we build back better is first to acknowledge, address, and repair past grievances. I urge the Environmental Protection Agency to not only revise its lead and copper rule as proposed, but to ensure equitable and just enforcement. This is the first step to addressing past harms and restoring trust in vulnerable communities across our nation. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your statement. And thank you so much for your participation today. I'm now going to turn things over to Jennifer for closing remarks.
Thank you, Kiana. I just want to thank everyone for joining our listening session on the lead and copper rule revisions today. EPA appreciates the time that you have spent to develop these comments and to provide them to the agency, and we appreciate you sharing them with us this evening.
I'd like to add my thanks to those provided by Jennifer. I also want to state my appreciation for your patience with us as we use this technology to connect with you. It's a very powerful way to hear directly from everyone, but there still are technical challenges in working with it, and I appreciate everybody being patient as we work with you to try and give everybody an opportunity to speak.
I'd likewise like to thank everybody for taking time out of your day and your evening. And I really appreciate the opportunity to hear your very important statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, Jack, and Eric, for your time today. I would also like to remind participants and members of the public to submit any written comments to the docket at regulations.gov. So this will conclude our LCRR public listening session for today. Thank you all for your participation and testimony, and thank you for joining us.